You're listening to Ask Dr. Jake. My name is Dr. Jake Tucker, owner and founder of Good Life Family Chiropractic here on the south side of Lincoln. And I'm coming to you today with another message of health, hope, and wholeness. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you've gone through the gamut of doctors and you've been given partial answers or no answers or no hope regarding your health condition, then you are in the right place. Definitely write down this number, 531-289-7100. You can call or text us and leave us a message, and we will absolutely get back with you to take you on your individual next steps to getting healthy and becoming whole again. That's what we're here for, is getting you to a place where you can truly be whole. Now, if you want to connect with us on Facebook or on the internet, you can absolutely do so. Our radio show page, Ask Dr. Jake. You can find us by typing in the URL, facebook.com/AskDrJake, or just type in the search bar, Ask Dr. Jake. And you can find all the videos of our recordings that we've done here. You can also look for the podcast version of this show. If you missed any episodes, we have all of those posted wherever podcasts are downloaded. So if you like iTunes or Apple Radio or Google Play or any other preferred store, you can find us there, all at no cost. We bring these to you to serve you as the body of believers, as the body of Christ, coming together to make sure that we're able to fulfill the promise that God made for us. In John 10:10, Jesus said that I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And that's what we want to live in today, is we want to live in that fullness of life. Now, our current healthcare system does not provide that. The fullness of life is not a goal of our current healthcare system. In fact, the Medicare definition of medical necessity states that any care that seeks to prevent disease, promote or enhance the quality or longevity of life is not considered medically necessary and therefore will not be covered. And so this is not a place you can go to for health. It's a misnomer. A healthcare system is not about your health. It's about sickness and disease and symptom management and treatment. That's all it's for. You are not going to be healthy and well relying on your health insurance or relying on your medical doctor. The matter of fact is they're not trained in health. Medicine is the study of disease and what causes a man to die. Chiropractic, on the other hand, is the study of health and what allows a man to live. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And so coming back from this long weekend last week, I had a lot of time to think about my son's situation. If you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you realize you've heard me talk about what happened to Ezekiel last week. I guess it's 2 weeks ago now. We actually, I was in the middle of shift. Some of you were actually in my office. Some of you listeners that, especially coming from Omaha or coming from Fremont or coming from Columbus, you were actually in my office because you like that late morning time and it works out better for you. But I had to leave early, and I left early because I took a phone call from my wife saying that my son had stopped breathing. And so I left and I met them in the emergency room, and he was struggling to breathe. He was seizing, and I went immediately over to him. I started praying for him. I held him in my hands, began comforting him. And just by my nature, just by default, my hands went to his spine, not because I wanted to check him chiropractically, but because that's what happens when I put my hands on someone. I wanted to check the integrity of his central nervous system. Just innately, I wanted to see how well it was healing and functioning. And right off the bat, I noticed something very wrong. His atlas, the top bone in his neck, the one that sits right below the base of the skull, right where the brainstem exits out and forms all these cranial nerves that control so much function throughout the body, it was shoved over to one side. And as I noticed that, I just began to massage it back into place. It's how I adjust any infant, is I basically assess the spine, and then because their joints are so underdeveloped compared to an adult, all I have to do is massage the vertebra back into the correct position, and then just check everything to make sure it held the right position as I did that massage correction. As I did that, he began calming down. As I massaged him, he stopped the seizure. He started breathing normally, and he started asking for his mama. Now he's 5 months old, and according to every measure, and we got this remark down all throughout the weekend, he is beyond those benchmarks that we call milestones for development. He is a month or two ahead, and so he actually says mama at 5 months old. And he asked for her, and he wanted to eat. And then he started eating, and then he fell asleep. And we watched him this whole way. His vitals kept returning back to normal. And then because we didn't know where the seizure came from, we didn't know where the breathing problems came from, we proceeded to go through the medical systems tests. Just like many of you end up with a dysfunction in your health that creates symptoms, and you don't know where these symptoms are coming from. And so you start going through the medical test. Now, they looked at his brain. They did a CT scan, and they looked at his lungs. They wanted to see if there was any problem with his lungs. They took a chest x-ray. They looked at his blood to see if there was any sign of infection. Ultimately, we ended up at Children's Hospital in Omaha. They looked at his cerebrospinal fluid to see if there was any infection that had happened to cross over into his cerebrospinal fluid. And the only answer they gave me was a guess. Before there was any evidence, they asked me to give him an antipsychotic, anti-seizure medication, and they asked me to give him an antiviral and an antibacterial. We allowed them to give him an anti-seizure medication, which, looking back, there was no need for it because they hadn't found any cause for that seizure, so there was nothing to treat. There was no seizure actively happening, and seizures are really just the brain resetting back to a state where it can compute the information coming through again, and are ultimately the right response in an awful situation. They are your body's response to reset neurologically. I didn't know that at the time. I learned that after the fact. So after that first small dose, because he's an infant, he didn't receive any more medication. They offered the antiviral and they offered the antibacterial. Actually, they insisted on it, but we declined. And we had to decline forcibly, politely, but forcibly, because they wanted to cover their bases, because they were worried what would happen if they didn't give it to him and they found out it was. Now, there were no signs or symptoms other than the seizure and breathing problem itself that there could be a bacterial or viral infection. It was just their response. They wanted to give him something just in case. Now, I know that an antiviral and an antibacterial actually attack his immune system because your immune system is 80% bacteria. Let me say that again. Your immune system is 80% bacteria and maybe even more than that viral. We just don't know and understand the bacterium and virum that make up the immune system and how that functions with the organ cells and tissues that are actual human cells inside your body. Your body is 36 trillion cells. If you've just had a bowel movement, it's 10 times more that than in bacteria than it is human cells. Over 360 trillion bacteria cells at any given moment. If you haven't had a bowel movement, it goes one more multiple of 10 greater, up to 100 times more bacteria than actual human cells. You are more bacteria, you are more virus than you are human. And so it begs the question, who's the host? Are we hosting these bacteria to keep us alive, or are the bacteria hosting us and happen to be keeping us alive in that environment? We know from the study of epigenetics that environment is key. And so I wasn't going to allow them to poison the environment for the sake of fighting off something that might or might not be there. So we didn't do that. They ended up just doing a bunch more tests. They did an EEG to look at the electrical activity in the brain. They did nothing for his spine. They did nothing. Even though I told them what was going on with his spine, they ignored it completely. The only image that they got of his spine was a one-off from the CT scan. They happened to get the top bone in his neck after I had corrected the alignment, and it just reinforced in me that I had addressed it appropriately. They looked at his MRI. All they did is look at his brain. All they did was they wanted to make sure that the soft tissues around his brain were appropriate, that they were appropriately functioning and appropriately in the right place. And then ultimately, they just watched him for another 24 hours and they sent us home because nothing came back on the spinal tap. Nothing came back on the blood panel. No seizures came back. In fact, they continued to remark, the specialist, the neurologist at Children's Hospital, continued to remark at how healthy my baby was, the one that quit breathing and stopped functioning properly, that had a seizure and didn't stop those problems until I adjusted him. Now, this is not every baby story. I have two older children than that do not have any of those problems, nor have they ever had, nor will they ever have those, God willing. But every child deserves to be checked because every single one of my children after birth and continually throughout their childhood has had a neurological response to a misalignment in their spine. And let's talk about how this works, because your spine is not just bone, nor is your nervous system just the soft neural connective tissue that we know as the brain, the brainstem, the spinal cord, and the nerves that exit off of it. It's a neurospinal organ. It's made up of bones and muscles and ligaments and nerves and spinal cord and brainstem and skull. It all works together in harmony. It's synchronistic. When everything's in alignment, when everything's functioning properly, your nervous system controls all function in your body. For your heart to beat, for your lungs to breathe, for a cut on your leg to heal, this signal has to go from your brain, run down the spinal cord, run out the nerves to every organ, cell, and tissue in the body. But when it's not functioning well, and it misfunctions because of three things: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. If there's physical damage to the spine, if there's chemical damage to the spine, if there's emotional damage to the brain, to the spinal cord, or to the nerve roots, it creates dysfunction in that system. That's the definition of health. According to the World Health Organization, your health is a state of 100% optimal function and healing. The ability of your body to heal and function is how healthy you are. It's independent of your symptoms or lack thereof. It's independent of the medications you do or do not take. It is 100% the amount your body functions and heals. And nobody in the best children's hospital in the region, maybe even the United States, was able to find any misfunction in his nervous system after I corrected the misalignment of his atlas, even though he had had a seizure, even though he had a severe respiratory episode, because it's all about function. They're not trained in function. They're trained in disease and diagnosis and in pharmaceutical management of conditions and symptoms and diagnoses. What I'm trained in is health and vitality and wellness through the care of the central nervous system and through the support, the healthy support of those other systems that support the health of the central nervous system. And when I found that misalignment and I corrected it, his body restored to healthy function. He's not had any health problems in the last 2+ weeks, nor any time before that. And going back and looking at what actually happened is that morning, after I had left for work, before my wife took him to daycare, his sister was not wanting to put on her pants. And she's a 2.5-year-old and a very strong-willed 2.5-year-old. And she happened to kick him in the face, which dislodged his atlas. But nobody, including his mom, who's married to a chiropractor, right? She did not know that it was out of alignment until he had the symptom afterward. Don't wait until there's a symptom. Have your baby's spine checked. Have your spine checked. Get the whole family checked. Do it at a discount today. Remember, 531-289-7100 or goodlifefamilychiropractic.com. I'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Ask Dr. Jake.